I grew up in a traditional family where both my parents were devoted Christians. They were good parents, and I always had this strong desire to make them proud. It didn't make things easier that my older siblings were overachievers. They consistently earned excellent grades, married their high school sweethearts, and were on the path to creating traditional American families. I found myself yearning for that same sense of accomplishment and the admiration my parents showered on my siblings. In high school, I realized I was different. I was attracted to both genders, a fact that I knew wouldn't be well received in my traditional family and community. So I kept this part of myself hidden from my family and friends, suppressing my true identity. It wasn't until I entered college that I had the opportunity to explore and understand my own feelings. During those college years, I met Lisa. She was my fellow coursemate, coming from a similarly traditional background, yet she too identified with both genders. In our relationship, Lisa took on a more dominant role. We dreamed of spending the rest of our lives together, knowing deep down that we would eventually build a family of our own. Our connection was special, providing me with the support and understanding that I had longed for. However, we were both aware of the challenges we might face in fully embracing our true selves, especially within the context of our conservative upbringing. Yet, together, we held on to the hope that one day we could break free from societal expectations and build a life that authentically reflected who we were. Lisa and I were unabashedly girly girls, reveling in the joys of makeup and dressing up to catch the eyes of boys. We didn't conform to any stereotypes of pretending to be boys. We embraced full-on femininity. In our world, being feminine meant embracing the spectrum of attraction to both genders. We firmly believed that any future husband we ended up with should be as open-minded as we were. As our second year in college unfolded, Lisa and I took an unconventional path. We decided it would be an interesting idea to share the same boyfriend. At first, everything seemed to be going smoothly until life threw us a curveball. My girlfriend became pregnant, and the guy, who initially seemed on board with our arrangement, suddenly turned his back on her, wanting no part in the impending parenthood. This event became a stark turning point, forcing us to confront the reality that advertising ourselves as a two-in-one package might not attract the right kind of partner. The realization hit us hard. We didn't have a plan for this unexpected turn of events. Faced with the prospect of having a child out of wedlock, with an absentee father, and our ongoing college commitment, we reluctantly decided that the best course of action was to have the baby removed. The decision was agonizing, especially given our backgrounds in religious households. It had a profound impact on our friendship and lifestyle. While the experience strengthened my belief that women are resilient and capable, it left a bitter taste in our mouths. The strain from the event gradually caused my relationship with Lisa to drift apart. The foundation of trust and camaraderie we had built seemed to crumble under the weight of difficult decisions and unforeseen consequences. Before I met my now husband, Lisa and I were involved in a romantic relationship, exploring our connection with other women. However, when I decided to commit myself to my faith, I felt compelled to suppress that aspect of my identity. My husband, who shared similar religious beliefs, became a significant source of support during this transition. We both believed that embracing relationships with both genders contradicted the tenets of Christianity, and it was a part of me that needed to be subdued. Fast forward 8 years after my husband and I tied the knot, I found myself taking a break from work to become a stay-at-home mom. At that time, I was 33 and my husband was 34. Our family had grown with the addition of a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old. As we navigated the challenges and joys of parenthood, my focus shifted from my previous experiences to building a stable and loving home for my children. The years of marriage and motherhood had brought a sense of fulfillment and purpose to my life. However, as I contemplated re-entering the workforce, I couldn't help but reflect on the complexities of my past. The journey to reconcile my faith, identity, and family had been intricate, and I wondered how these factors would shape my future endeavors. Over the course of those 8 years, my husband and I experienced a period of backsliding, during which our devotion to our faith wavered. This shift occurred primarily because I had moved beyond the phase of trying to impress my parents, having lived up to their expectations. Our once unwavering commitment to our religious beliefs became more relaxed, allowing us to explore new aspects of our relationship. One thing that remained constant was the open communication my husband and I shared. We were transparent about our desires and fantasies. During intimate moments, we engaged in a game where we would openly discuss our fantasies and past relationships. Strangely enough, these conversations became a catalyst for heightened pleasure, bringing us to climax more quickly. Sharing these intimate details became a significant part of our relationship, reinforcing the bond we had. As time passed, we found ourselves divulging deeper fantasies during these intimate discussions. The notion of introducing another couple into our relationship emerged as a recurring theme. We spoke candidly about how such an arrangement might unfold, creating a unique and thrilling dynamic between us. These conversations became an integral part of our intimate life, intertwining with our physical connection. Our sexual experiences became inseparable from the explicit and daring words we shared, creating a shared language that defined our relationship. Fast forward to about 13 months ago, when I was gearing up to re-enter the workforce. In my quest to balance career and family, I decided to hire a babysitter through a sitter app. Little did I know that this decision would lead to a significant shift in our lives. The babysitter, a 23-year-old named Sophie, quickly became an essential part of our family. What started as a part-time gig soon transformed into a full-time position as we hired her permanently. Up until that point, my husband and I never thought our fantasies of introducing a third person into our relationship would be a reality. Since the topic normally surfaced organically during intimate moments, I shared with my husband how I fantasized about making love to Sophie, and from that point forward, she became a focal point in our fantasies, even to the extent of attempting to make a move on her. Despite the unconventional turn of events, I developed a genuine connection with Sophie. She wasn't just an employee, we formed a strong bond quickly. Sophie's sweetness and gentleness made her endearing, and she opened up to me about various aspects of her life. I couldn't help but feel a deep affection for her, and our relationship grew beyond the professional realm. Sophie became more than just our babysitter. She was a friend. We enjoyed girl trips, split everything down the middle, and embarked on shopping excursions together. The children adored her, and her presence brought joy and positivity to our household. Little did we know that Sophie's role in our lives would evolve in unexpected ways, challenging the boundaries of our conventional family dynamic. Our connection with Sophie continued to deepen, and our interactions became increasingly personal. I often complimented her on her looks, not with any intention to seduce, but genuinely acknowledging her beauty. Our attraction grew organically, and I approached it with care, knowing that this was her first experience with a same-gender relationship. Despite the age difference, Sophie and I became the best of friends. We hung out after work while my husband looked after our kids. During one memorable night out, Sophie took the initiative and planted a kiss on me. It was the first time in over 8 years that I had experienced such a moment, and I knew I wanted more. Surprisingly, I didn't let the kiss progress further at that moment, wanting to savor the anticipation and enjoy the excitement of the budding connection. I played it cool, treating the situation as if it were entirely normal, avoiding any awkwardness. Strangely enough, it did feel normal to us, but I couldn't wait to incorporate it into our fantasies during intimate moments with my husband. Sharing the experience with him became a part of our intimate dialogue, where I disclosed my desires and fantasies about Sophie. It took Sophie and me about a week to fully express our feelings physically, and even then, I felt a longing for the full intention during my intimate moments with my husband. What made it more acceptable was that Sophie knew my husband was aware of our relationship. Surprisingly, my husband didn't object. Instead, he embraced our connection, becoming a willing participant in our unconventional dynamic. To my surprise, we managed to maintain professionalism with Sophie even after we became intimate. My husband behaved normally around her, to the extent that she found it hard to believe when I told her that he was truly aware of our affair. The intricate web of emotions, desires, and connections continued to weave its way through our lives, challenging societal norms and redefining the boundaries of our relationship. Reflecting on the unfolding events, it became apparent that my husband's aloofness around Sophie seemed to fuel her desire even more. She was the one advocating for a three-way dynamic involving him. As she moved in with us, we neglected to establish clear boundaries. Fueled by the intoxicating belief that our unconventional arrangement would last forever, we failed to anticipate potential complications. In the beginning, we reveled in the joy of what felt like living a dream. However, signs of trouble surfaced when my husband began prioritizing activities with Sophie. He encouraged her to exercise, diet, and dress attractively. She became the first person he would contact with good or bad news, the first to receive his greetings upon arriving home. They even went on weekly dates. My husband insisted it was at Sophie's insistence, and I tried to dismiss it as her being the new shiny object in our lives. As time went on, the situation spiraled out of control. I began feeling marginalized in my own relationship. When I finally confronted my husband about my concerns, he admitted to feeling a heightened sense of intimacy with Sophie, describing her as his best friend. This revelation hit me hard, as I reminded him that I am the mother of his children and that he had once considered me his best friend. His response was that he loved both of us, but confessed to experiencing a unique warmth when thinking about Sophie. The revelation shook the foundation of our relationship. I found myself grappling with feelings of betrayal and neglect, wondering how our unconventional family dynamic had led to such a complicated and emotionally charged situation. The dream I thought I was living began to crumble, replaced by the harsh reality of a relationship teetering on the edge of uncertainty. Sophie, to her credit, made consistent efforts not to leave me out of anything. She went out of her way to include me, spoil the children equally, and ensure that everyone felt cared for. This made it easier for me to place the blame solely on my husband when our unconventional arrangement took a disheartening turn. About 4 months ago, my world was once again shaken when Sophie revealed she was pregnant. Instead of the joy she expected from me, I was overcome with disbelief and a sense of awakening. The fantasy we had been living suddenly became stark reality. Questions flooded my mind. How would I explain our relationship to others? How could I make sense of this unconventional lifestyle to friends and family, none of whom I knew were living in a similar way? Confronting my husband, I expressed how he had shattered the trust I had in him. This wasn't the direction I had anticipated our unique family dynamic taking. It became clear that we had overlooked the need for precautions to prevent Sophie from getting pregnant. The reality hit us hard. We had been so caught up in the fog of our unconventional relationship that we hadn't considered the consequences. Despite my initial openness to our arrangement, the revelation of Sophie's pregnancy brought forth a surge of conflicting emotions. It wasn't just about the potential societal judgments we might face, but more about the fear of losing my husband's affection and the realization that Sophie was slowly taking over my place. As the truth unfolded, I discovered that Sophie intended to keep the baby, suggesting a future where my husband would essentially have 2 wives. Feeling left out and conflicted, I grappled with the decision of whether to suggest terminating the pregnancy. It wasn't a position I wanted to be in, but the longer I waited, the more entrenched my husband and Sophie became in the idea of expanding our unconventional family. The tangled web of emotions, trust issues, and the uncertain future of our family continued to unfold, leaving me in a state of profound confusion and emotional turmoil. When I mustered the courage to broach the topic of considering termination with my husband, he vehemently rejected the idea and expressed anger at me for even suggesting it. The situation took a darker turn when he began laying blame on me, asserting that everything that had transpired was my fault since I was the one who brought Sophie into our lives. In response, when I argued that we were both responsible, he contended that it was meant to be a fantasy until I pushed it into reality. To my dismay, my husband shared my suggestion with Sophie without seeking my consent. This revelation strained our relationships further, and both of them refused to speak to me for days. Attempts to resolve the issue only made me feel like an outsider in my own home, as if I were being painted as the villain in my own story. The worst part was sensing that my children had grown more comfortable with Sophie than with me. I felt like I was being replaced in a plot akin to a horror movie, with no one to confide in. Night after night, I found myself crying in isolation. Adding to the emotional turmoil, I contemplated playing the divorce card, thinking it might jolt my husband into facing the reality of our situation. However, when I finally told him we were heading for divorce, he didn't even flinch. The weight of rejection and isolation bore down on me, amplifying the sense of despair and uncertainty about the future. It was a heartbreaking realization that the life I had envisioned had unraveled into a nightmarish scenario, leaving me grappling with the consequences of my choices and the shattered relationships around me. The days stretched on, each one a silent echo of the turmoil within me. 2 months had passed since I raised the specter of divorce, and in that time, I couldn't bring myself to mention it again. It seemed as though my husband's indifference to the idea had sealed its fate. I felt an overwhelming sense of shame, realizing the magnitude of my mistake. Sophie's presence in our home, her growing belly a constant reminder of the tangled web we'd woven, became increasingly difficult to bear. The thought of asking her to leave felt impossible, fearing the repercussions it might have on my kids and their relationship with their father. I found myself relegated to the periphery of my own life, a bystander in a narrative I no longer recognized. It felt like being trapped in a silent scream, where the pain and confusion mounted within, suffocating any attempt at resolution. I knew a decision needed to be made, but the path forward was shrouded in uncertainty. Each passing day, Sophie's bump grew more pronounced, a visual testament to the entanglement of our lives. I forced myself to maintain a facade of normalcy, all the while feeling like a hostage in my own home. The silent cries for help echoed within, yearning for a solution, yet unable to find a way out. I grappled with the weight of my situation, lost in a maze of conflicting emotions and paralyzed by the fear of the consequences of any action I might take. The once promising life I envisioned had shattered into a chaotic maze, leaving me stranded in a whirlwind of emotions and unanswered questions. I understand I need to decide what to do, but I'm unsure about it. That's why I'm reaching out here. Please, fellow Redditors, I know I messed up and I feel like an idiot, so I don't need reminders.